The grand halls of the Zitharan palace shimmered under the glow of crystalline chandeliers. Alien nobles, dressed in elaborate robes, whispered among themselves. Tension filled the air as Emperor Xalvath, ruler of the mighty Zitharan Empire, stood before the gathered council. His piercing golden eyes scanned the crowd before he raised his hand, calling for silence. "The time has come to strengthen our ties with Earth," he declared. His deep voice echoed through the chamber. "To ensure peace between our species, we have reached an agreement with the Terran High Command. A marriage will take place between our royal family and a human representative." A hushed murmur spread through the court, but none were more shocked than Princess Scifi herself. Sitting beside her father, her blue eyes widened in disbelief. "A marriage?" she repeated, standing abruptly. "Surely, this is a mistake. You cannot expect me to marry a human." The Emperor's gaze remained firm. "It is not a request, Scifi. It is necessary for the future of our people." Scifi clenched her fists. She had trained her whole life to be a ruler, not to be given away like a political bargaining chip. Marrying a human. It was unthinkable. Humans were unpredictable, reckless, and far too emotional. "I refuse," she declared, her voice strong and unwavering. "I will not marry a human." Gasps rippled through the court, but the Emperor showed no reaction. "The decision has already been made. The human representative is en route to Zithara. You will meet him soon." Zyra's sharp glare met her father's, but she knew arguing further was useless. Still, she silently vowed that no matter what, she would never accept this arrangement. Aboard the Terran warship Vanguard, Captain Adrian Voss leaned back in his chair, watching the stars streak past as they approached the Zitharan homeworld. Unlike the aliens who feared this political marriage, Adrian wasn't particularly bothered. He wasn't thrilled about it either, but duty came first. Approaching Zithara, the navigator reported. Adrian sighed, running a hand through his short brown hair. "All right, let's get this over with." The moment his shuttle landed at the royal palace, he was met by a group of Zitharan guards. Their leader, a tall and imposing warrior, stepped forward. "Captain Adrian Voss," the warrior announced, his voice laced with disdain. "You are expected." Adrian smirked. "Nice to meet you too." The guards led him through the palace corridors, where curious alien nobles watched him like he was some kind of strange creature. He could hear their hushed voices. "A human. He does not look very impressive. They are smaller than us, yet they claim to be strong. Does he even understand our ways?" Adrian ignored them, used to the skepticism. He had dealt with worse during negotiations with other alien species. Humans were always underestimated, until they proved otherwise. Finally, they'd reached the royal chamber. The doors swung open, revealing Princess Zyra sitting on a grand throne. She was undeniably stunning, tall, with sleek violet skin and deep blue eyes that burned with intensity. But the anger in her gaze was unmistakable. "So," she said, standing gracefully, "this is the human I am supposed to marry." Adrian crossed his arms. "Captain Adrian Voss, at your service." His tone was casual, but his sharp eyes studied her carefully. Zyra scoffed. "You should not have come. I refuse this marriage." Adrian chuckled. "Trust me, princess, I didn't wake up this morning thinking I'd be marrying an alien either. But here we are." Zyra's expression darkened. "Do not mock me, human." "I'm not mocking you," Adrian replied evenly. "I'm just saying, I don't plan on forcing you into anything. I'm here because my people sent me, just like you're here because of yours." Zyra was taken aback by his calm attitude. She had expected arrogance or desperation, but Adrian seemed indifferent. He wasn't groveling, nor was he trying to prove himself superior. He was just there. The Emperor finally spoke. "You will have time to speak further. For now, we shall proceed with the diplomatic discussions." Zyra turned away. "There is nothing to discuss. I will not marry him." Adrian simply shrugged. Fair enough. But don't expect me to leave that easily. Zyra glared at him, but Adrian only smirked in response. He had a feeling this was going to be an interesting challenge. Little did they know, forces within the Empire were already plotting to ensure that this union never happened, no matter the cost. Princess Zyra stormed out of the royal chamber, her elegant robes flowing behind her. Anger burned in her chest. The human. Of all the possible suitors in the galaxy, her father had chosen a Terran. She clenched her fists, her sharp nails digging into her palms. "I refuse," she muttered under her breath. "No matter what." Behind her, Captain Adrian Voss watched with mild amusement. He had expected resistance, but Zyra's reaction was stronger than he had anticipated. He had faced dangerous warriors and cunning diplomats, but a stubborn alien princess. That was new. A royal advisor cleared his throat. "Captain Voss, you will be shown to your quarters. The princess requires time to process." Adrian smirked. More like, "Calm down," he thought, but he simply nodded and followed the guards through the palace. Zyra paced in her private chamber, frustration boiling inside her. She activated a holographic screen and called her most trusted friend, General Varric. "Varric, tell me there is a way out of this," she demanded. Varric, a tall and battle-scarred Zitharan warrior, crossed his arms. "Not unless you wish to defy the Emperor publicly. The treaty is important, Zyra. If you refuse, it could cause tension between our people and the Terrans." Zyra exhaled sharply. She hated this. She was a princess, a warrior, a leader, not some bargaining tool for peace. "I will never accept this," she said firmly. "Then make him reject you," Varric suggested. "Prove to him that you are not suitable. Humans are strange. Perhaps he will walk away on his own." Zyra considered this. Yes, that could work. She would make Adrian regret ever stepping foot in Zithara. The next morning, Zyra entered the royal training hall. It was where warriors practiced combat, a place of strength and skill. If she had to interact with Adrian, she would do it on her terms. Adrian was already there, stretching his arms. He wore a simple black shirt and tactical pants, looking far too relaxed for a man in an alien palace. Zyra smirked. "You are a soldier, are you not?" Adrian raised an eyebrow. "Something like that." "Then let's see what you can do." She tossed him a practice sword, its blade dull but still heavy. A simple sparring match. Adrian caught the sword easily. "You sure you want to do this? I wouldn't want to embarrass you in front of your people." Zyra laughed, a sharp and confident sound. "You assume you stand a chance, human." The match began. Zyra attacked first, her movements swift and precise. She was trained in the art of Zitharan combat, and she expected Adrian to struggle. But to her surprise, he dodged smoothly, parrying her strikes with ease. Adrian grinned. "Not bad, but you rely too much on brute strength." Zyra narrowed her eyes. "And you rely too much on talking." She lunged again, faster this time. Adrian countered, stepping aside at the last moment, and tapping her shoulder lightly with his blade. "Point for me," he said. Zyra's jaw tightened. The gathered warriors watched in stunned silence. A human was matching the princess in combat. Unacceptable. She attacked again, this time using her full strength. Adrian blocked, his muscles straining, but he held his ground. "You're strong," he admitted, "but predictable." Zyra growled, frustration growing. Finally, she feinted left but twisted at the last second, knocking Adrian's sword from his hand. She pressed her blade against his chest. "Yield," she commanded. Adrian looked down at the sword, then back at her. He smirked. "Fine. You win this round." Zyra stepped back, victorious, but unsatisfied. Why was he so calm? Why did he not seem bothered by his loss? Adrian picked up his sword and rolled his shoulders. "That was fun. We should do it again." Zyra blinked. Fun. He had lost, yet he was smiling. This human was strange. Later that evening, as Kyra walked through the palace gardens, she overheard two advisors speaking. "The princess humiliated the human today," one whispered. "Perhaps he will leave soon." "Unlikely," the other replied. "Terrans are stubborn. He seems amused rather than offended." Zara frowned. Adrian should have been insulted. He should have wanted to leave. Yet he remained. Why? She found him sitting on the edge of a balcony, looking out at the distant stars. "You do not act like a man forced into marriage," she said. Adrian turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "Because I'm not." Zara crossed her arms. "Then why are you here?" Adrian shrugged. "My orders. But that doesn't mean I have to fight it. Besides, I think you're interesting." Zara scoffed. "Interesting? I humiliated you in battle. And yet, you're still talking to me." Zara opened her mouth to argue but stopped. He had a point. Before she could respond, an alarm rang through the palace. Guards rushed past them, shouting. "What's happening?" Adrian asked, standing quickly. Zara's communicator beeped. Varric's voice came through, tense. "An assassination attempt. Someone is targeting the royal family." Zara's heart pounded. "Who?" There was a pause. Then Varric spoke again. "You." Adrian's eyes locked onto hers. "Looks like we're in this together, princess." Zara clenched her fists. She still didn't want to marry a human. But right now, survival came first. The piercing sound of alarms echoed through the palace as guards rushed in every direction. The usually calm and regal hallways were now filled with tension and urgency. Princess Zara stood frozen for a brief moment before her warrior instincts took over. She turned to Captain Adrian Voss, who was already scanning the area with sharp eyes. "You need to get to safety," Adrian said firmly. Zara scoffed. "I am not some helpless noble human. I can fight." Before Adrian could respond, a sudden explosion rocked the palace. The walls trembled, and a section of the corridor collapsed in a cloud of dust and debris. "Move!" Adrian grabbed Zara's wrist and pulled her back just in time before rubble crashed where she had been standing. Zara yanked her hand free, glaring at him. "Do not touch me." "Would you rather be crushed?" Adrian shot back, unfazed. Zara exhaled sharply. But before she could argue further, a group of masked attackers emerged from the smoke. Their weapons glowed with dangerous energy, and their intentions were clear. They were here to eliminate the princess. One of the assassins raised his weapon, aiming straight at Zara's heart. In a split second, Adrian lunged, tackling her to the ground just as a laser blast streaked past them. "Stay down," he ordered, drawing his sidearm. Zara, refusing to be protected like a weakling, rolled away and pulled out her own energy dagger. She sprang to her feet, slicing through the nearest attacker with swift precision. Adrian, beside her, fired controlled shots, taking down another. But they were outnumbered. More assassins appeared, surrounding them. Zara's mind raced. Who had sent them? Someone opposed to the treaty. A rival faction. Whoever it was, they were well organized. "We need to retreat," Adrian said, backing toward a side corridor. "I do not run," Zara growled, blocking a strike with her dagger. Adrian deflected an incoming blast with his armored gauntlet. "Then fight smarter. We're trapped here." Zara hated to admit it, but he was right. They couldn't win this battle head-on. With a sharp nod, she signaled Adrian to follow her. Using her knowledge of the palace, she led him through a hidden passage behind one of the collapsed walls. The narrow tunnel was dark and damp, rarely used except for emergencies. They moved quickly, hearing the sounds of their pursuers behind them. "Where does this lead?" Adrian asked, keeping his weapon ready. "To the lower levels of the palace," Zara replied. "We can escape through the old transport tunnels." "Good, because we're running out of time." Behind them, footsteps echoed in the tunnel. The assassins had found the passage. Zyra and Adrian broke into a sprint, navigating the winding corridors. Suddenly, a blast struck the wall beside them, sending debris flying. Adrian shielded Zyra instinctively, taking most of the impact. He winced. All right, that hurt. Zyra saw a gash on his arm, blood staining his sleeve. For a brief moment, concern flashed in her eyes, but she quickly masked it. You are slowing down, human. Adrian grinned despite the pain. And you're still talking instead of running. Zyra huffed and grabbed his uninjured arm. Come on. They finally reached the transport tunnels, an ancient underground system long abandoned. Zyra activated a hidden control panel, opening a rusted metal door. We can escape through here, she said. As they entered, the door shut behind them, cutting off their pursuers. The silence was deafening, broken only by their heavy breathing. Adrian leaned against the wall, inspecting his wound. Well, that was fun. Zyra rolled her eyes. You are strange, human. We nearly died, and you are smiling. Adrian shrugged. I've been through worse. Zyra studied him carefully. He was different from what she had expected. She had thought humans were weak, inferior. But Adrian had protected her without hesitation. He had fought bravely. And now, even injured, he remained calm. For the first time, doubt crept into her mind. Was she wrong about humans? She turned away. We should keep moving. They will find another way in soon. Adrian pushed off the wall and followed her. Lead the way, princess. As they ventured deeper into the tunnels, one thing became clear. This was no longer just about a forced marriage. Someone wanted Zyra dead, and now Adrian was caught in the middle of it. Neither of them knew what awaited them ahead, but one thing was certain: they would have to rely on each other to survive. The underground tunnels were damp and silent, except for the soft footsteps of Princess Zyra and Captain Adrian Voss. The air smelled of rust and old stone, a sign that this passage had not been used in decades. The flickering emergency lights cast eerie shadows on the walls, making the atmosphere even more unsettling. Zyra moved swiftly, her sharp eyes scanning the darkness ahead. She had been trained in royal tactics and survival, but she had never expected to be hunted inside her own palace. Beside her, Adrian kept pace, his injured arm still bleeding from the earlier battle. He didn't complain, but Zyra could see the stiffness in his movements. You should treat your wound, she said, not looking at him. Adrian chuckled lightly. I will, as soon as we find a safe place. Right now, I'd rather not stop and get ambushed again. Zyra frowned. She still didn't understand him. He was different from what she had imagined humans to be. He was not weak or fearful. He was calm, focused, and even amusing. They reached a junction where the tunnel split into 3 paths. Zyra hesitated for a moment, trying to remember the correct route. Before she could decide, Adrian spoke. We're not alone, he whispered. Zyra stiffened. She listened carefully. And then she heard it. Soft footsteps. Multiple people. Someone was following them. Move, she ordered in a hushed voice. They took the left path, quickening their pace. The tunnel grew narrower, the walls closing in. Zyra recognized this route. It led to an old service hatch that would take them outside the palace, but they needed to reach it before their pursuers caught up. Suddenly, a noise came from behind. A metallic clatter. They're close, Adrian muttered. Zyra drew her energy dagger, her heart pounding. If they catch us, we fight. Adrian smirked. I was hoping you'd say that. Before they could take another step, a shadowy figure leaped out from a side passage. Zyra barely had time to react before a blade slashed toward her. She dodged, countering with a quick strike of her own. Adrian raised his sidearm and fired at another attacker, but more emerged from the darkness. The tunnel erupted into chaos. Zyra fought fiercely, her movements sharp and precise. She blocked an attack, spun around, and struck her opponent down. But for every one they defeated, two more appeared. "These guys don't quit," Adrian grunted, dodging a strike. Zyra's mind raced. They couldn't keep fighting like this. They were outnumbered. Then she spotted something. A weak point in the tunnel structure. "Adrian, the ceiling supports. Shoot them," she shouted. Adrian glanced up, understanding immediately. He fired 3 quick shots at the old metal beams above their enemies. The weakened structure groaned before collapsing, sending a cloud of dust and debris into the air. The assassins screamed as the tunnel caved in, cutting them off. Zyra coughed, waving away the dust. "That won't stop them for long. We need to go." Adrian exhaled. "Agreed." They hurried forward, finally reaching the old service hatch. Zyra pressed a hidden switch, and the heavy door creaked open, revealing the city beyond. The cool night air hit them as they stepped outside. They had escaped the palace. For a moment, neither spoke. They were exhausted, injured, and unsure of what came next. Adrian broke the silence. "So, who wants you dead?" Zyra glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "That is what we must find out." Adrian leaned against a wall, finally tending to his wound. "Well, princess, looks like we're partners in this now." Zyra sighed. She still disliked the idea of marrying a human, but right now, survival mattered more. "Let's find out who wants to kill me," she said. "And then, we'll deal with this ridiculous marriage." Adrian grinned, looking forward to it. As the city lights flickered in the distance, Zyra realized something. She had been wrong about humans, at least about this one. The cold night air carried the distant hum of the city beyond the palace walls. Princess Zyra and Captain Adrian Voss stood in the shadow of an old transport station, hidden from sight. They had escaped the palace, but danger still lurked behind them. The assassins who had tried to kill Zyra would not give up so easily. Zyra kept her back against the wall, scanning their surroundings. The city of Zithera Prime stretched before them, a maze of towering structures and glowing sky bridges. Somewhere in that vast metropolis, their enemies were watching. Adrian crouched beside her, wrapping a bandage around his injured arm. He winced slightly but made no sound. "You should rest," Zyra said, her voice quieter than before. Adrian smirked. "I'll rest when I'm dead, which, judging by today, might be soon." Zyra rolled her eyes but didn't argue. She had to admit, Adrian was tough. He had been fighting alongside her without hesitation, despite being wounded. Humans were strange creatures, stubborn and unpredictable. "We cannot stay here," she said. "If they track us, we will be cornered." Adrian nodded. "Agreed. We need a safe place to regroup and figure out who's behind this." Zyra hesitated for a moment before making a decision. "I know someone. A contact in the lower districts. He has access to information." Adrian raised an eyebrow. "Can we trust him?" Zyra's expression hardened. "I don't trust anyone, but he may help us, for a price." With no better options, they moved quickly through the city streets. Zyra led the way, her steps precise and calculated. Adrian followed, keeping a watchful eye on their surroundings. The neon lights of Zithera Prime cast strange shadows, and more than once, Adrian felt like they were being watched. After weaving through several alleyways, they reached a small underground hideout. The entrance was hidden behind an abandoned market stall. Zyra knocked 3 times on a rusted metal door. A small panel slid open, revealing a pair of reptilian eyes. "Password?" a rough voice asked. Zyra leaned closer. "Open the door before I break it down, Taro." The eyes blinked. Then the door creaked open. Inside, a Zitheran man with scared skin and sharp fangs smirked at them. "Ah, Princess, what an honor," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. His gaze flickered to Adrian. And you brought a human. That's new. Zara ignored his comment. We need information. Someone inside the palace wants me dead. Taro chuckled. Join the club. Half the noble houses want power, and the other half want you out of the way. Zara's patience was wearing thin. Tell me something useful, or I'll find someone else. Taro sighed and gestured for them to sit. Fine, fine. I did hear rumors. There's a faction inside the Empire that opposes the treaty with Earth. They believe humans are a threat. Adrian crossed his arms. Let me guess. They decided killing the princess would be the easiest way to stop the alliance. Taro nodded. Exactly. And they're well-funded. Someone powerful is backing them. Zara frowned. Do you have names? Taro hesitated, then slid a data chip across the table. This contains encrypted messages between some of the conspirators. If you can decode them, you might find your answers. Zara grabbed the chip. This better be real, Taro. Taro grinned. I'd never lie to royalty. Zara didn't believe him, but she didn't have time to argue. As they left the hideout, Adrian spoke up. So, what now? Zara clenched the data chip in her hand. Now, we uncover the truth. Before Adrian could respond, a loud explosion rocked the alleyway. The shockwave sent them crashing to the ground. Zara's ears rang as she struggled to get up. Through the smoke, she saw dark figures approaching. More assassins. They found us, Adrian growled, pulling out his weapon. Zara ignited her energy dagger. Then let's finish this. The battle erupted instantly. Adrian fired with precision, taking down 2 assassins before they could reach them. Zara moved like a shadow, slicing through enemies with deadly grace. But the attackers were prepared. More emerged from the smoke, surrounding them. Adrian was forced back, and Zara found herself facing an elite assassin armed with twin plasma blades. The assassin lunged, forcing Zara into a defensive stance. Their blades clashed, sparks flying. Zara gritted her teeth. This opponent was skilled. Adrian fought off another attacker but saw Zara struggling. Without thinking, he rushed forward. Just as the assassin aimed for a killing strike, Adrian intercepted, taking the hit on his already injured arm. Zara's eyes widened. Adrian. Ignoring the pain, Adrian used his free hand to grab the assassin's wrist and twist it sharply. The enemy cried out, and Zara seized the moment, driving her dagger into his chest. As the assassin fell, the remaining enemies hesitated. Seeing their leader dead, they fled into the darkness. Adrian collapsed to one knee, breathing heavily. Blood dripped from his arm. Zara knelt beside him. You fool. Why would you do that? Adrian grinned weakly. Call it instinct. Zara stared at him, her emotions a mix of anger and something else, something unfamiliar. This human had just risked his life for her. For the first time, she felt something other than annoyance toward him. Respect. Come on, she said, pulling him up. We need to get you patched up. As they limped away, Zara realized something important. Maybe, just maybe, this human wasn't as terrible as she had thought. The dark alleys of Zithera Prime were eerily quiet after the battle. The distant hum of the city was the only sound that accompanied Princess Zara and Captain Adrian Voss as they walked toward an abandoned safe house. Zara's grip was firm on Adrian's arm, guiding him forward despite his injury. You are heavier than you look, human, she muttered as he leaned against her for support. Adrian chuckled weakly. I'll take that as a compliment. Zara sighed, half annoyed and half amused. Even after nearly getting killed, he still had a sense of humor. She had to admit, it was impressive. Finally, they'd reached the safe house, a small hidden bunker beneath the old city structures. Zara keyed in a code on a panel, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. Sit down, she ordered, leading Adrian to a metallic bench. Adrian obeyed, wincing as he settled in. His arm was covered in blood, the wound deep but not fatal. Zara retrieved a medical kit from a nearby shelf. Hold still. Adrian smirked. I didn't know princesses knew how to treat wounds. Zara shot him a glare, but focused on cleaning the wound. I was trained in many things. Diplomacy, combat, survival. She paused. And first aid. Adrian watched her carefully. Her touch was firm but careful. It was strange to see her like this, focused, determined, yet not as cold as before. You don't have to do this, he said after a moment. Zara's hands paused before she resumed her work. You took a hit for me. This is the least I can do. For a moment, there was silence. It wasn't the awkward kind. It was something else, an understanding between them. After finishing the bandage, Zara sat across from him. We need to go back to the palace. Adrian raised an eyebrow. I thought we were avoiding that place. Zara nodded. We were. But now, we know someone inside is behind this. The only way to end it is to face them. Adrian leaned back, considering her words. And what if it's someone close to you? Someone you trust? Zara's jaw tightened. That thought had been haunting her ever since she got the data chip. What if the traitor was someone within her father's court? I have to find out, she said. Adrian gave her a small nod. Then let's do it. The next morning, disguised in civilian clothing, Zara and Adrian made their way back to the palace through a hidden entrance used for supply deliveries. The grand halls were eerily calm, as if nothing had happened. But Zara knew better. The attack was still fresh in her mind. She led Adrian to a private chamber where they could decode the data chip safely. After inserting it into a secure terminal, a series of encrypted messages appeared. Zara's fingers flew across the console, breaking the encryption. The screen flickered, revealing the names behind the assassination attempt. Zara's breath caught in her throat. No, it cannot be. Adrian leaned in. Who is it? Zara clenched her fists. Lord Vakar, my father's most trusted advisor. Adrian let out a low whistle. That's bad. Zara stood abruptly, her mind racing. He must have convinced others to support him. He sees humans as a threat to our empire. He would rather see me dead than let this treaty happen. Adrian frowned. Then we need to expose him. Zara exhaled sharply. Easier said than done. He has power. Influence. We need proof. Adrian crossed his arms. What if we make him reveal himself? Zara looked at him, curious. How? A grin spread across Adrian's face. By doing the one thing he fears most, announcing your acceptance of the marriage. Zara's eyes widened. You cannot be serious. Adrian shrugged. Think about it. If you publicly declare that you will go through with the marriage, Vakar will panic. He'll be forced to act. And when he does, we'll be ready. Zara paced the room, considering his words. The idea was insane. She had spent weeks fighting against this marriage, and now she was supposed to agree to it. She turned to Adrian, searching his expression. He was serious. This is a risk, she said. Adrian nodded. It is, but it might be the only way to bring him down. Zara took a deep breath. For years, she had lived by duty. She had fought for her people, trained to be strong, to be a leader. And now, she had a choice to make. Finally, she looked Adrian in the eyes. Fine, we do it your way. Adrian grinned. That's the spirit, princess. Zara crossed her arms. Do not get used to it, human. Despite her words, she felt something shift inside her. For the first time, the idea of marrying Adrian didn't seem so impossible. The grand hall of the Zitharan palace was filled with nobles, military officials, and royal advisors. Murmurs echoed across the chamber as they waited for Princess Zara to speak. The air was thick with tension. This was the moment where she would announce her final decision regarding the treaty and her marriage to a human. Captain Adrian Voss stood to the side, watching carefully. He knew this was a trap. Somewhere in this hall, Lord Vakar, the traitor, was waiting for his chance to strike. Xyra took a deep breath, stepping forward. Dressed in royal attire, she looked every part the warrior princess she was. She raised her voice, steady and strong. I know many of you have doubted this alliance. I have doubted it myself. She let her gaze sweep across the room. But after everything I have seen, after facing betrayal within our own walls, I have made my decision. A hushed silence fell over the hall. Even Emperor Xalvath, her father, watched with careful eyes. Xyra turned toward Adrian, her expression unreadable. I refuse to marry a human, unless it is one of my choosing. Gasps rippled through the audience. Lord Vakar, who had been standing near the Emperor, stiffened, his hands curled into fists. Xyra continued, her voice unwavering. I have tested this man. I have fought beside him. He has saved my life, not once, but multiple times. She locked eyes with Adrian. Captain Adrian Voss, if you will stand beside me, I will accept this union for the good of both our people. Adrian blinked. He had expected her to make the announcement as part of the plan, but he hadn't expected her to say it like that. For a moment, the room was silent. Then a slow, mocking clap echoed through the hall. Lord Vakar stepped forward, a cruel smirk on his face. So this is how far we've fallen, he said coldly. A proud Zitharan princess choosing a human. This is a disgrace. The Emperor narrowed his eyes. Watch your words, Vakar. But Vakar was past the point of hiding. His eyes gleamed with hatred. No, my Emperor, you watch. I will not stand by and let this empire be corrupted by Terrans. With a swift motion, he pulled a concealed weapon from his robes and aimed it directly at Xyra. Gasps filled the room. Guards moved, but Adrian was faster. With lightning reflexes, he lunged, grabbing Xyra and pulling her down just as the weapon fired. The energy blast missed them by inches. Before Vakar could fire again, Adrian rolled forward, drawing his own sidearm and shooting the weapon out of the traitor's hand. Guards finally rushed in, surrounding Vakar. He snarled, his carefully laid plans crumbling before his eyes. You fools, you cannot see what is coming. Humans will ruin us. Xyra stood, her expression cold. No, Vakar, the only thing that nearly ruined us is your betrayal. The Emperor's voice was like steel. Take him away. Vakar struggled, but the guards dragged him out. The room remained silent, the tension still thick. Finally, Emperor Xalvath turned to his daughter. You have made your choice, he said, and you have proven your strength. Xyra met her father's gaze. I only did what was necessary. The Emperor nodded, then looked at Adrian. And you, Captain Voss, it seems you are more than just a soldier. Adrian gave a small shrug. I try my best. A small smile touched the Emperor's lips. Then perhaps this alliance is not such a terrible idea after all. The hall erupted into murmurs again, but this time the tone had changed. The traitor had been exposed. The princess had made her choice, and despite the initial doubts, there was now a path forward. Xyra turned to Adrian. You never did answer my question. Adrian raised an eyebrow. Which one? Xyra extended her hand. Will you stand beside me? Adrian looked at her for a long moment. He had come to this planet expecting only duty. He had not expected to find a battle worth fighting, or a princess worth standing beside. He smirked and took her hand. I thought you'd never ask. The decision had been made. The future of their worlds had changed. And as they stood together, one thing was clear. This was only the beginning. The end.